get our conversations started on CARICOM. And you do recall that last weekend we would have had our National Day of Significance, rooted in the 1937 rights, but the story that was told to us from last week still resonates in my head, that it started in Belize and came right down the island chain, Barbados. Oh boy, what a story to be told. So now we begin to locate ourselves and locate ourselves within the context of who we are and why we are where we are. We're joined this morning in our conversations on CARICOM by Barbados Ambassador to CARICOM, His Excellency David Comissiong. Ambassador, good morning.
Morning, Pearson.
I wasn't here. I missed it. How did it go?
Well, it was fantastic. Just to use one word, we had that beautiful conversation last week where we had spokespersons from Belize, St. Vincent, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica. On Saturday, when we did the actual event at Golden Square, Freedom Park, we were joined by Guyana. But and we did it under the theme, one cause, one struggle, one Caribbean. And that is what I want to focus on in our conversation this morning. The fact that our Barbadian present and future is more and more going to be located within this wider pan-Caribbean and even pan-African context. And so I really want us to start by just looking back at that event at Golden Square on Saturday, where I was introducing Prime Minister Motley, and we get a little bit of her speech, but we were all hitting on the same theme of that collective struggle and the fact that it is now so important that we come together in solidarity to face all of the challenges that are bearing down on us, that we are much stronger together.
All right, let's take a look at that and we'll come right back after.
Why we make the effort to come together periodically, to have these collective commemorations of important historical milestones. It is all about bringing us together to develop a sense of national consciousness, to root our national culture, to develop out of our collective reflection on these heroic episodes in our history, to develop a sense of purpose, a national sense of purpose. And as we move forward with projects like the Full Freedom of Movement project, it is going to become more and more important that we don't simply have national reflections, but we put those national reflections within a wider Caribbean and sometimes Pan-African context. And so this is the purpose of this particular commemoration today, where we reached out to Belize and St. Vincent and Jamaica and Guyana. And it now gives me great pleasure to invite the person best able to put all of that together and the meaning of all of that, none other than our own Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley. Please make her feel welcome as she comes to the podium. And we reflect on the words of Clement Payne, who said on the 20th of July, 1937, "I'm going to make this spot the Mecca of organization in this island." Prime Minister, I know you will do justice to the legacy of Clement Payne.
Thank you very much, David, Ambassador. Good evening to each and every one of you. Good evening to each and every one of you. We're beginning to sing a little better now. The oppressive forces that would stop you from speaking are no longer in the air of this nation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Right. I start here because since when we met last year, a number of things have happened. And as I address them, I want you to reflect on who we are and where we are and why we are here. But allow me first this evening to say thank you to all who have spoken. I thank the Queen Mother for her libations. I thank all who spoke on this platform, bringing to the consciousness and awareness of our people in this country that when we acted on July 26, 1937, that it was not a singular act, but in truth and in fact, part and parcel of a series of rebellions in response to the failure of the then authorities to improve the conditions under which our people lived almost 100 years after the right to freedom had been conferred upon them. And we know that in our own country, that right to freedom and emancipation was constrained by the Located Laborers Act, which effectively tied you to the plantation if you wanted to retain your house as a tenant. You had to sell your labor to the particular plantation, and you were prevented from going around and trying to see if you could secure a higher wage from a different plantation. So I give context because many of our people need to appreciate that this is not some faraway concept, that we come together first to give thanks that they had the courage to do what they did. Because when we look around and contextualize it in today's world, we ask ourselves, who has the courage to stand up and to defend where wrong needs to be repaired?
Who has the courage to stand up indeed, so lest we forget. And so there is Prime Minister setting it again, as you have done over the weeks, into context about where we are today, who we are today, on whose shoulders we stand. And then you ask yourselves, now what do we do? Having recognized and reflected, what do we do?
Well, you know, the Prime Minister went on to outline all of the challenges that we face and the fact that we have to approach these challenges collectively. In fact, she stressed the fact that none of our Caribbean countries actually even have the population base, you know, to fuel our development going forward. And she made the point about the full freedom of movement. That is why it's so important that we are able to remove these barriers, we're able to come together, and we're able to allow our people to move so that we can make full use of our collective resources. So that's the point that I really want to stress this morning, that this is more and more, this is going to be our perspective, because we recognize that we are living in a very, very difficult world. And it is going to be increasingly difficult for single Caribbean countries to make their way alone. And we are coming, that conviction is beginning to really sink in. And that's why we're going to start that freedom of movement on the 1st of October. But that's why, and I don't even want to limit it to the Caribbean, because we are also expressing that reaching out to the wider African world, that Pan-African vision. And even this morning, Pearson, when I leave here, when I go to work this morning, one of my first duties this morning is going to be to participate in a planning meeting with the African Union and CARICOM to plan the heads of government, the Africa CARICOM Heads of Government Summit that is going to be held in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on the 7th of September. So, you know, that's what I'm going to be doing this morning. And even while I am doing that, in Grenada, our neighbor, a very important Pan-African conference will be taking place. You know, the African Export-Import Banks, African Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum, what we call ACTIV. You know, and so just to make the point, wherever you look, you're going to find Barbados reaching out in Caribbean solidarity, but also with these very important Pan-African initiatives. So Prime Minister Motley is a champion of this vision, but it's not only Prime Minister Motley. Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell, for example, of Grenada, that's hosting the conference. I think that we may have, a clip of a statement from him explaining the importance of what is happening in Grenada as we speak.
Yes.
And our Prime Minister was there yesterday to participate in that very important Afri-Exim Bank meeting.
Well, let's take a look at that comment from Prime Minister Dickon Mitchell.
Great to see you today, this evening. Looking all good. I hope you had a good trip.
Welcome, especially to those of you who have traveled far and wide to be with us here in Grenada for the next few days.
Today, we begin marking the commencement of the 4th edition of the Afro-Caribbean Trade and Investment Forum.
With the theme Resilience and Transformation, Enhancing Africa-Caribbean Economic Cooperation in an Era of Global Uncertainty. That's the rationale behind Active 2025. We'll take a break here. We're coming back to continue our conversations on CARICOM. And so while we try to sort that break out, Ambassador, perhaps we can take a look at there's another element to what we were talking about. I know when the Prime Minister spoke earlier, Barbados Prime Minister, I said, lest we forget. And there's actually, because putting it all into context is so important. And sometimes in that context, we can forget. And we want not to forget. We want to be able to root our knowledge and not forget, but to build upon. So yeah. I know there's a publication, Lest We Forget.
Yes, Pearson, you are very skillful. I love the way how you segued into Lest We Forget. And for the benefit of viewers, sticking with the same theme, of our Pan-African linkages. The book I'm holding up, that goes by the title of Lest We Forget, is a product of the former president of Nigeria, President Olusegun Obasanjo. And later today, he is going to be coming to Barbados with a Nigerian delegation. Former Prime Minister of Jamaica, P.J. Patterson, he is going to be coming as well with a Jamaican delegation. And we're all going to be meeting tomorrow at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Center to launch this book. And this book that was edited by President Obasanjo is about, lest we forget, slavery, slave trade, colonization, emancipation, and reparation. And it contains a number of essays. I have one of the chapters in this book. The famous West Indian fast bowler Michael Holding, he has written a chapter, not on cricket, he's written a chapter on, I'll give you the name of his chapter, The Roots of Racism and the Abomination of Slavery. So once again, this is a Pan-Caribbean, Pan-African project where we are coming together to reflect on our common history of enslavement, of the transatlantic slave trade, the things that, the evil history that we share in common, but also looking forward to the campaign, the collective campaign for reparations, the collective campaign that we're going to work together, Caribbean, Africa, to undo that historical damage that was done to us and to forge new linkages, new relationships. So this again, what will be happening in Barbados with the launching of this book, this again is symbolic of what I call this new phase of our development, where yes, we recognize our national achievements. We are very proud of our national achievements, but at the same time, we have this growing consciousness that those national achievements are not singular, that they have tentacles that reach out to Caribbean brothers and sisters, Pan-African brothers and sisters. Because, you know, if you look back at our history, almost everything that we have achieved, you can find a collective context for it. Slavery, abolition, it wasn't just our Buster rebellion. It was the rebellions in Jamaica and Haiti and Guyana and all across the Caribbean that sent that message to the British government, look, these rebellions are coming too fast and furious. We can't continue with this system. I mean, achievement of independence, achievement of universal adult suffrage, even the establishment of our Cave campus. When you look at it, you recognize that there's always a Pan-Caribbean or Pan-African context to what we are doing. So this is the recognition that we have now, that we are stronger together. We have to build these relationships and go forward into this difficult world as a unified collective people.
With a greater understanding of self, greater understanding of our past, but also with a determination to help chart the future for those yet to come. And so that's the way I see it within the context of lest we forget. Because when we forget, then other people create our narrative. And so to avoid that, the book has been developed. Slavery, slave trade, colonization, emancipation, now reparation, and that's not the end.
No. That lays the foundation
Exactly.
for what we are going to do together in the present and the future. Yes, and you know, it comes back again to Prime Minister Motley, because that was her message on Saturday. She said, look, the enemy is not going to be the armada of the the 18th century,
Exactly.
the fleet of warships coming to conquer us. Or it's not going to be the Berlin Conference, where they sit down in Berlin and they carve up the African continent. She said, no, those, we're not going to face those, but the threat is going to be even more insidious. The threat is going to be more nuanced. The threat is going to be about how they control information, how they control the narrative, how they control what we think. And she said, you know, if we are not careful, those forces that are still intent on dominating and exploiting us will reimpose more subtle forms of control and dominance that they will be even more difficult to confront and defeat than the old forms of colonialism that we fought, you know, when we gained our freedom of, as independent countries. And so she made the point about emancipate yourself from mental slavery, and that we have to get control over our information. We have to get better control over our education system, our education processes, so that we can produce the kind of well-informed, enlightened, conscious populations, that we are then capable of fighting our battles. We are capable of uniting and building our own nations, our own futures. And again, that's the point I was making too, that these these commemorations where we come together, we don't just do them just for the sake of going through the motions. It's all about coming together to build that collective consciousness, you know, to look back on our heroes, what they were trying to do, what they were saying to us, and to help us to get our thinking straight, to get our sense of purpose and vision straight. And I am so happy now that we have reached this stage of maturity and consciousness where we are building a collective future with our Caribbean brothers and sisters, but also with our African brothers and sisters. And I must tell you, Pearson, it is personally very, very satisfying for me. In fact, last week, one of the things I did last week in my capacity as chairperson of the Caribbean Pan-African Network, last week we held a very important Global Africa people-to-people forum where we came together, we from the Caribbean, we came together with the African Union's Economic, Social and Cultural Council and the African Union's Citizens and Diaspora Office, and we had this wonderful people-to-people forum, spokespersons from the Caribbean, from United States, from the African continent. Prime Minister Motley was there, Sir Hilary Beckles was there, but several dignitaries from the African continent, young people, we had youth respondents. So it was really a wonderful exercise in bringing together that Pan-African family, not just the big prime ministers and government officials, but officials of CARICOM, officials of AU, but young people and civil society people. And what were we talking about? Well, we were talking about our common agenda.
Yes.
All of the things, all of the challenges that we face together, and all of the things that we intend to do together to defeat those challenges and to go forward.
Lest we forget. And so people talk to people, we buy from people, we engage with people. And so knowing our brothers and sisters on the African continent is so critical for us making the change and reordering our minds, reordering our thoughts, reordering our society. And there are many structures of our society, Ambassador, which we have to really look at again. Education comes to mind immediately. Access, we talk about freedom of movement. That is another step forward because travel will also have to play into that there as well. Our ability to move from the Caribbean back to Africa to get a sense of the realities that we all share.
Yes, these are some of the critical things that we have to deal with. And you hit them right on the head. Those are probably two of the most important. Our education system. We have to totally decolonize our education system. And we have to create a system where we are giving our young people the knowledge, the information about themselves, from our own perspectives, not some kind of colonial thing that relegates us to a footnote and it's all about governors and the British Colonial Office and so forth, but to understand our own authentic history and to create our own worldview where we are thinking for ourselves. No outside force can manipulate us intellectually or emotionally. So we still have a job to do to totally decolonize the system and to give our people that consciousness and strength. And then the other thing, transport. I'm going to be pushing hard that if there's one concrete outcome from that Africa CARICOM summit in September, we must come away from that summit with a serious commitment to and a plan for those direct flights between the African continent and the Caribbean region. Because if we can achieve that, then so much more can be built upon that. Because many of the things that we want to do, we really can't do if people can't move. People have to be able to move, and goods have to be able to move. So we can do trade, we can do tourism, we can do people-to-people visits and linkages. So you've hit the nail on the head. And when we say education, it's not just the formal education. It's also like what we are doing now. The role that a Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation has to play. I think you have touched on two very critical things. If we can get those two right,
oh yes.
If we can get the education and consciousness of our people right, and we can put in place that infrastructure for movement, for travel across the Caribbean, across the Atlantic to the African continent, to and fro, well, I think we would really have set the platform for great things.
I think so. So people, we need to wake up. We're at a point in time we have to be aware. We have to really wake up our minds and get more knowledge about where we are, why we are, where we are, the people with whom we need to connect to, people from whom we draw our source of energy, and get cracking on making the change we want to see. So thank you, Ambassador. This has been a really interesting conversation on CARICOM yet again. I really appreciate your efforts and your conversations.
Thank you, Pearson. As usual, it's a pleasure to come here and share with you on Tuesday mornings.
Thank you.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you.